It's like trying to turn a rusty wheel. Probably when you try to push it at first, it's not going to move at all. But maybe if you just keep pushing long enough, it will slowly start to turn before it really starts spinning.
Our featured speaker today is a software engineer with a background in statistics and a passion for using technology to solve real world challenges. He's the founder and CEO of Everpesa Technologies, a fintech startup dedicated to transforming financial inclusion and investment across Africa. Jerry, it's a great pleasure to have you as our featured guest today. Thank you so much for being willing to share your journey with us.
All right. Thank you so much for hosting me, Nancy. It's really a pleasure to be on here today.
The pleasure is all ours. We were wondering, could you start us off just kind of giving us a little bit of background about yourself, maybe some of your experience growing up, and how you feel like some of those early life influences kind of shaped the path you took and who you've become?
Sure, sure. Nice introduction, especially to those who might don't know me, who I am. So I'm Jerry Vance Aguzu, and I am based in Uganda. Uganda is a country which was once called by Winston Churchill the Pearl of Africa. It's somewhere along the equator. It's such a beautiful country, great people, great food. I think first I'd really like anyone to come and visit anytime they really want to travel. So I'm born from actually a very remote part of Uganda, a remote part of Uganda, which is in the northern region of Uganda. Now, it's a remote part of Uganda, and it's also a part which has quite a unique history of Uganda. A lot of the Western media might probably be familiar with Uganda through especially the former president who was Idi Amin Dada. He so happened to have come from this same region that I was born in. The interesting thing that this caused is especially the war in the 70s, which was really because Uganda has a very complicated political history. And there was really a large war and a civil war which took place in Uganda, especially when the presidency was changing around that time. So this is really the region that I come from. Now, one of the key things that happened, especially after the war, is a lot of this part of the country really remained very underdeveloped as compared to the rest of the country. This was probably done in one part, maybe deliberate efforts or sort of like a punishment, maybe, or sort of, especially because the people who had been ruling the country up to that point were really coming from this region. So when power changed hands or the dynamics really came about, you had a situation whereby a large population was forced to flee as refugees to DR Congo and South Sudan. And so a lot of that whole region actually remained very undeveloped, which is really the case probably up to now. Definitely much, much better, but it's really still the case. And it's so much so that even my own parents had to flee and had to be refugees in DR Congo for some time before then eventually returning back to Uganda much later when there was peace. So that really set a lot of precedents for the way we eventually used to grow up, because it was really not an easy life growing through Uganda. I was fortunate enough, I think, which is not the same thing with a lot of people, to have an education. I was able to go to school and to study through the entire education system, eventually also having an undergraduate degree where I studied a bachelor's degree in statistics. I studied statistics because I was really interested in a mathematical field, and I really wanted to see how science basically can be used to solve our real world problems. And I think to me, this is one of the key things that attracted me to this subject. And a big aspect of that is as we were really growing up, managed to get a mobile phone. I think a smartphone. I explicitly remember my first smartphone, which was a Huawei Y330 phone. That was really the first tool that I used to go on the internet. This is the time where you used to go to the internet. You go to like a local cafe, or you go and you go to like a local university or an institution around and try to get onto their Wi-Fi network, because I mean data is so expensive you couldn't afford it. So this really starts introducing me to a lot of courses and materials online. Like you see all these kinds of things online, and you really get a lot of interest in terms of learning them, what they are, and all that. And to me, one of the things that really caught my eye is finance topics, especially about finance, what is banking, and all those things. Because one thing I really understood, I think very early on, is that I think for society to develop, people need to have finances, people need to have money, people need to have jobs which they can work to, and then they earn money, which is they earn a living, which enables everything else. to me, I really strongly believe this is really the starting point. There's a lot of talk you can say about maybe helping people, educating them, and all that. But you see, if people do not actually have a means to live, that is always going to be complicated. So finance is really a very important aspect. So to me, this was a field that I was always interested in from the onset. And this is really why, which looking back, seeing my life and everything I've done ever since, it was always obvious that I was going to end up in this particular sector up to the point I eventually founded a fintech startup, which is Everpesa Technologies. So to me, the inspirations of growing up and seeing the hardships and really understanding the dynamics of the economy now, unemployment is something which is talked about a lot, especially throughout the world. But I think there's a different perspective to unemployment, especially from the African scene, because you have universities which are churning out graduates every year and then, but there's really no industries where these people are going to be employed. When you look at what issues such as globalization have caused this, majority of production is coming in from China, maybe. So there's a lot of importation of a lot of goods, which everything is almost made in China or is made from out. So that means that the local industries in the country really never got any time to develop. So if you have no industries, you have no production in the country. And majority of Uganda is still really about 70% of the working population is still employed in agriculture. And this is not like commercial agriculture. It is subsistence agriculture. So it's basically subsistence agriculture. What that means is you really grow crops on your land so that you can get food to eat, not for selling and all that. So what that causes is that there's really a continuation of poverty and low incomes really across the board because there are really no such opportunities. To me, one of the things I really understood on is one, education is really an important thing to really understand how the world actually works. And really after that, you need to be able to empower people to be able to move up that kind of income ladder and up that income scale. A lot of people still do not have formal bank accounts, or if the ones who do have bank accounts, I really do not have even the money to put into those particular bank accounts. Banks are still mostly a city-based kind of thing, which is really mostly available in the urban centers. The people who are mostly in rural areas still do not have access to such kinds of financial products, which to me is a challenge that I sought out to see how we can actually address this. And this is really the key foundation for where the ideas of Everpesa came from. As much as there are no formal financial systems, especially being used by people in more rural areas, they do have some sort of financial systems they're using. And what they use is something which is called a circle. Now, what a circle is a savings and credit cooperative organization. And what it will be, I think, for an international audience, it's similar to what a credit union will be in maybe the US and all, except like a much, much smaller version. It's like a community organization. A bunch of people in the community come together and they're trying to, they save money. Now, this is usually not a lot of money. It's really small money, whatever anyone can afford. And this is the money they save together and they are able to go and get loans from that. So this is completely informal. It is not via any banking systems and all that. To us, the issue is really not that there's no sort of finances at all, but there are all these kinds of informal ways people actually are transacting and doing commerce. Because a lot of people, because there are no jobs, a lot of people are default forced to become entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs in terms of really operating small businesses, which is really the basics like selling merchandise in the market, which is not really big merchandise, because when I say merchandise, I'm not really meaning a lot of things. I mean like someone who has a tomato selling stall, is selling a bit of onions, is selling like really the basic things, which are with total capital they're operating with is maybe $100 or less. That is the total capital the business is actually operating with. So a lot of such businesses are really the way people actually survive in the country. So to me, we really believe there should be a clear way to help these kinds of organizations. That really informed my founding of Everpesa Technologies, which is really a fintech company, which is designing software solutions really to help these underserved communities. And really the key product we have is Safari Banking, which is a core banking system. So core banking system similar to what you have like the various systems which are used in banks really to manage all their savings and all that. So what we're trying to do is, can we get these local organizations, organize them in such a way and provide for them the technology and the means so they can be able to manage their savings, so that they have a digital way to one, be able to track their savings so that they're able to apply for micro loans, they're able to buy shares in these particular entities or these circles, these savings and credit cooperatives. So what our system really does, it helps digitize that entire stack for the mostly informal communities. And we believe by digitizing them, we are really helping bringing them closer to more formal financial systems, because this also helps them to be able to build a credit history. And in most ways, these are the only means they're able to access any kinds of credit facilities, because the regular banks will never work with them. So the only way they get any facilities to be able to put in their businesses which I mentioned are operating on maybe $100 or $200 of capital, is really through these informal groups which they save their monies with. So it's a very core component of the financial system in Uganda. And to us, really, that is the key spectrum that we really want to help digitize and bring into the formal financial systems.
Thank you so much, Jerry. I really appreciate seeing like the level of passion that you have for the problems you're trying to solve and helping others businesses to be connected to the financial system. So your target audience is those businesses, not the individuals. Is that correct?
Yeah, because our target audience is the businesses, the circle, these credit cooperatives, which extension are really helping the individuals, because to us that's the easiest way we can help a wide audience, by helping the businesses which eventually interact with the normal person on the street.
Can you tell us a bit about when you first started Everpesa? How did you go about finding these circles and connecting to them? Because I imagine they're, as you described, like they're quite rural areas. It can be quite difficult to locate them. How did you go about that?
I like the way you ask it, because it almost implies that we don't do that anymore now. Like, process has improved over time. Actually, not yet quite. It's still a very manual process. It's something which is quite hectic, which is really the biggest part, is because a lot of these organizations are in the rural parts of the country. So what you have to do is you have to make trips, especially with your sales teams, and you go out to the field, and you're trying to, especially the local communities. There are always people who are able to help, who are like the local councillors. Every small community usually has some type of leader who you can always talk to. So these usually know what is going on, what are the organizations running in this particular part. So it's really always partnering with such local government entities that we're able to talk and really see where are these particular groups, and which we are able to then come and help. But in a lot of ways, it's still a very manual process, which really requires you to be one out there in the field, talking to people, really getting to know the people in these particular areas who are running these particular organizations, and really onboarding them in a mostly it's still a very manual process in terms of getting them on board, because it's not really just that they are all ready to onboard onto this particular platform, but one day it's need to be the education aspect of it, really bringing them up to speed with some of the basics of computer usage, to really bring down that kind of digital divide, explain to them what computers are so they understand and also appreciate what are the benefits of digitizing and what are the benefits of having digital records and all this. So it's still quite a manual process. You really have to travel out. But I think over time, this is something we really hope that a lot, because smartphone connectivity is really going up a lot, especially in Uganda, because we have up to about, I think it's close to about 65 or so percent of people who are now getting connected onto the internet, because most people are getting connected to the internet through a mobile phone, not really through a computer. So there's a bigger population which is coming. So the key challenge is a lot of this population which is still coming online is still mostly in the urban centers, not so much yet in the rural communities. Those are still using a lot of the basic feature phones, which is also an aspect to really also try to look into, like being able to send them out SMSs so that we can be able to engage in those with the people who are not able to necessarily be available online.
Thank you so much for explaining that to us. And I really appreciate your passion too. I actually loved how you connected the country's history to your personal mission. I think you did that with such articulation that I've never heard before, honestly. And it makes so much sense, why there's a need for this now. I had read on LinkedIn, this was when we were gonna meet the first time, you had done some work to showcase the powerful capabilities of Safari banking through client demos. And I like the concept of co-creating, to build the best platforms for financial inclusion and sustainable investments. And I'd love to hear from you some more specifics on why you think that was the path to choose, and how the client demos went, if they're still going, how they're going, kind of the mechanics of the next steps involved to make it a reality for your clients.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think as founders, we always have our own biases, especially in terms of what you think the problem is and what you think the client wants. And you try to push it to them. But I really want to make an exception, I think, on this. And unless you're some kind of Steve Jobs and you just make it, give it to people, they'll like it later on after a while. I really think it's very important to listen to what the clients actually want. So in coming up with this particular system, we knew this problem existed. We knew there were a bit of solutions similar to that. So we knew we were not really, this is already a problem people have, people were asking about, and people were really interested in, especially in the support communities. But what we initially didn't really understand is what to them was some of the most important aspects, because we had a very comprehensive system we're offering them. We're telling them you can run on your loan zone, you can run on your savings zone, you can do a bit of accounting on the system, you can manage all your assets on the system. But keep on discovering. People are only asking, like, they almost want to stop you at some point when you keep on telling them all these cool features and all the platform does. Because to them, the things they're actually interested in most are only two things: loans and savings. And that's it. Like, am I able to can I record the loans I've made onto the platform? Am I able to track these particular loans? Am I able to send the reminders to these persons to return these loans for the due dates? Am I able to capture the savings of the people who come into the organization accurately? Which stand out to really be the most important aspects. So yeah, there's all these other aspects really wanted to put in, whether it's the investment aspect of it, because our thesis is that there's a lot of them who have a bit of money that they will actually put out to use, maybe to earn more returns, but really to most of the clients, that really did seem to be the most important factor. The most important was really, can they manage their loans, and they can then manage the savings of the members of this local community. And really, that's all. Everything else was secondary. Like, if you get those two working, that is okay. To them, that is the most important thing. And really, one other thing we really also started to understand is there's not yet a very big culture, especially in people understanding subscription models, especially for SaaS products and all that, because they really always want that kind of more, like, what more can you actually provide onto the platform? Can you also go beyond simply providing these and give them those extra services that can actually come about? Because a lot of them simply, because some of these clients, some of them are maybe they're farmers. So can you offer maybe extra products, maybe like bring on insurance products onto the platform, which they can offer, like micro insurance for these particular farmers, agriculture-based kinds of insurance? Can you also offer these smaller incentives onto the platform? I think that's also something we're really looking out and exploiting more into. But really, one thing we discovered is that you might have all these kinds of things you really want and you think are the most important to the client, but they usually speak through their money, because this is really the key things they say to you, like, can we really do this and that? And to us, I think that is really what brought the idea of co-creating. Like, okay, listen, we have all these dreams, we have all these aspirations, we've seen what works where, but how can we adapt it to the local context? Because an interesting thing is a software which will probably work in a market which always has high internet uptime might not necessarily be the perfect solution here. Many of them actually want a bit of offline solutions. Now, we are still currently a web-based platform, but you keep getting questions, for example, like, can this system actually work if the internet was completely off? Which it can't now, but those are things we are starting to look into, because these are the problems that are most important for them. Because in the rural areas, they know they don't have uptime connectivity throughout. So your system can't just simply be a web-based system. There has to be an application-based system whereby they can actually store their data, which then later syncs on into the cloud or whatever, whenever they're able to come back to that connectivity. And also, even in the operations, a lot of them are on the move. Yes, they have some of them have places where, like, you can go and you sit in a particular place, like this is the location of the organization, but it's always dynamic. Like, they're not always sitting in the ground. A lot of them are in the field because they have gardens and they have to go to the farm and all this. So it has to be dynamic enough that can it be on the go? Like, can someone be able to track all these things while they're moving in the field, while they're away? So these are things you kind of discover away from your desk when you're just sitting in front of a computer and writing code. These are things really you discover when you're actually talking to the real clients, and you see what are their unique perspective and what it is that they care about most. And I think to us, that's really what drove us to really start seeing, like, okay, yes, there's an approach you really want to take, but what is the client saying? What are the things which are most important to them? And how are we able to build with them in mind? So that at the end of the day, we have a solution, which is not your beautiful solution you're trying to enforce on people, but a solution people actually want and people actually going to use.
I think you make a great point at the very beginning of what you just said, which is about how, as founders, we like come up with the concept of what we want to sell and we think people would like. And then they can sometimes be like, actually, that's not at all what we're after. And you just try and push it out.
One interesting thing about that is because, as far as I was concerned, I was always convinced the investment aspect should really be the most selling point.
Hmm.
I feel like this is the most important, like, but then you go through the list of all the things and they only want to talk about their savings and their loans, and that's all. They're really not interested in all these other fancy things you're telling them about, which is really interesting. I'm still convinced there's still an opportunity for that, especially if you get the financial literacy levels a bit higher and you get people to have more income. But at least from what we are seeing now, that is what the client wants, and you have to go by that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to follow what the client is after, right? That's the fundamental rule of what we do. Thank
Yeah,
you so
yeah.
much.
Hi there. If you're enjoying this podcast, would you mind leaving us a review, a like, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform? Thanks so much. That really helps our reach. The Founders Voyage podcast is now proudly sponsored by VidOps. Kane at VidOps has been taking care of our editing since early 2024. He works efficiently, and I'm sure you'll agree that he does a great job. Thank you to VidOps for helping bring this podcast to life. If you want the same great support we're getting for your podcast, or you need help with video, photography, or animation, you can get 10% off at vidops.io using our referral code Voyage. That's vidops.io, referral code Voyage. Now back to the show.
Now, I've got sort of a question that's in two parts for you. One is I want to hear about what you see as sort of the long-term vision for Everpesa. Do you see it 5 years down the road or something? What do you see it's going to be then? And also, at the moment, what do you think is the biggest barrier blocking you from getting there? Like, what's the main problem that you're trying to solve right now to get to that point?
That's a very interesting question because I always like to think of the future, and I keep telling my team, like, you know what, it's really we are building for the future, and we need to really stick to that. To me, in 5 years' time, I see Everpesa evolving from simply being a software providing company, but to really becoming into a microfinance and eventually becoming a neo bank. That's the trajectory I'm seeing. Because for us, we really started out with a banking system, but we believe in supporting these organizations. We really want to reach to the point where we're able to offer these services ourselves. And to me, the future of Everpesa is really becoming a new bank. That to me is definitely where I see us going. But then also an interesting thing I have really seen in the field, especially when we want to bring about our solutions to a lot of clients, is because there's still that lack of access to internet services and especially access to devices on the ground. The teleco infrastructure is a part you cannot ignore, especially I think if you're building in the fintech space. Maybe it's different in other parts of the world, but I feel in the context in which we operate, because you see, there are a lot of solutions you can provide, especially digital solutions you can provide, but most of them are tied down to especially mobile money, which is the most prevalent way people are able to send and receive money in Uganda. So yes, people use cards, but cards are really mostly for the more affluent people. Majority of the population and even the affluent people really use mobile money, which is really just a quick and convenient way to send and receive money. Like you send money through a text message, basically, just a nice SMS, and someone receives money. Now, I think telecos have been able to achieve this because they really have, and they've built a lot of infrastructure over time, but most importantly, they've built really large networks over time. And large networks over time that now they have an agent in almost every part of the country. This is a very good thing, especially for inclusion, financial inclusion. But this causes a big problem, especially for people in the fintech space, because we only have two major telecom providers in the country in Uganda. And what these have done is created a sort of a monopoly, making it very hard for the fintech companies to really compete and offer anything into this particular space, especially around payments and all that, because they've really monopolized the market that if you want to make those kinds of easy payments, you must go through their platforms, and they charge you like crazy because in many aspects, they are also now in a similar business because many of them are moving out from the teleco business and moving really to the fintech side of the business. This is an important part to address that I think as a fintech are moving forward in our aspirations of really becoming a newer bank. One key area I want to be able to do is really to also have our own infrastructures onto the ground, our own infrastructures which are able to help, especially in delivering our services, especially in the long run, because that to me I feel is an invaluable part. The way I see us really getting this is first of all by running programs, especially pay as you go, to help people get connected, especially through mobile devices and really the internet. And we're looking can we bring about, how can we create our own kinds of connectivity solutions, especially for the circles we want to work with, our off-grid solutions. Fortunately, there's now solutions such as Starlink and all that, but how can we circumnavigate those kind of barriers which are really in this industry, these operational barriers? Because without your infrastructure, you will always be completely reliant on players who in many cases might not have your best interests really at heart because they're also trying to make money. So I think to us, really being able to also build physical networks, especially physical agent networks, that is also, I think, something which is very important to us so that we can have our own ways in which we're able to send money, receive money, and really provide more of these kinds of extra services to these companies. I like really some of the examples of a lot of fintechs I've seen, especially I think some in Brazil, or I think some which are really creating the eSIM, are those fintechs which also move in that telecom space. I really believe that's an invaluable aspect for a company which really wants to become relevant in the fintech space, especially in the long run. It's something you really want to be able to also look into. On really that question, where I see us is really becoming a newer bank and offering these core services, and also really moving into this connectivity, moving into the direction of connectivity to really have people on our own infrastructure, that to get them on the internet and to get them on devices which really we can control and have more say over. Some of the key challenges that we are facing, I mean, as an entrepreneur, you have distillation of just challenges you're facing on a daily basis. It's countless. I could list them the entire day, all the problems we go through. But I think to really highlight some of the most important one, I think access to finance is still really a key challenge, especially access to finance for startups. So you see, what we want to build is really, the dream is big, but then you need finances to really back that up and to be able to bring that about and to make it happen. Now, in the current market, especially I think after the US interest rate hikes and all that, it really, here's the interesting thing, I think how the world really works together. Prior to about 2021 or so, prior to COVID, there was really a lot of investment, especially coming into the African continent, a lot from the big players. Maybe that's in Nairobi. There is also Lagos in Nigeria, Ghana, and maybe South Africa and all that, especially investments into startups in Africa. But when the US, I think when interest rates really started to raise, you could see, and really a lot of, with the whole tech crash, the layoffs and that, a lot of firms really started pulling out, especially in investments in Africa, which really dried up a lot, especially in the investment ecosystem. Now, in Uganda alone, there's I think only one VC firm. It's not really even Ugandan based, a proper VC firm. It's only one in the country. It's not even in the country, but because it has presence in Africa, so Uganda is part of Africa. So ideally, they invest across the continent, but it's not even based in Uganda. So you can already see the problem. You're not like operating in the valley where you have thousands of VCs and all that. So there's really, you do not have a lot of people who are willing to put in that kind of risk capital to help and grow this idea, that you must really be forced to really invent and see how you're able to bring in resources to be able to keep building, keep the lights up, keep everything moving. So to me, I think finance is really one of the key challenges. Maybe still starting to pick up again. At least we see there's a bit of more investments which are coming back, but I feel like there's still a lot which is lacking. And also operating in the Ugandan market even lacks a little more than the general consensus, because maybe if you're Nairobi, which is really one of the key markets that we really want to see ourselves getting into and really establishing there, because we spent quite some time in Nairobi over the previous year, and really seeing their ecosystems is much further ahead and much more developed than the one in Uganda. So that's really a market we also really want to see. And their circles are really huge, they're really big. It's a whole thing. So really getting access to finance, to me, I think is still the key. And like I mentioned the early when I started this talk about why I think people need jobs, because without people having money, you cannot dream of all these other things. It's the same thing for a company. Cash is the blood of a company. So if you don't have enough cash, none of these other things eventually make sense. So I think to me, that's the key one. Also, another really big one, which I think is really also a challenge, which is also relative to the cash issue, is really also getting the talent, especially good talent, to work and really execute. So there's two things here. The good programmers are very expensive because they probably already have a job and they already have a lot going on for them. So you're not going to get them. And then the ones who are not really good, there's no point in hiring them anyway. So really getting that kind of talent, and the coding space, there's a very big gap between the people who are actually experienced and everyone else. People who are experienced, who can build and who can deliver things, and everyone else. A lot of people, yes, they probably can code, but they're not able to code something which is going to go into production and our client is going to use that app and all that. So the very good ones, it's very hard to hire them because the incentives they need to come up very high. The rest, they're not really going to do a good job. So it's really looking into how are you able to maybe build up your own teams and really bring them up to speed and bring them up to the skill level that they're able to deliver, which is really also a hard part, especially for a founder, because these are things you don't get to know. You think you're just going to build a company, but then you now start to run human resource. You have to do all this and really have that kind of understanding. So I think also the human resource, especially the talent, is also a bit of the challenge. And also I'd say the regulatory environment in which we are operating. There's still a bit of, especially from the government, it's still a bit difficult to operate, especially in the fintech space, because of the licensing requirements are really, really high. And a lot of the local work with the fintechs are. So I think you may have stated that those are the key challenges here.
I really like that you can see like the multifacets to the challenges that you're facing, but I also think that suits you to solve them. You have that plus your passion. Getting the right personnel, I know, is a challenge for any sort of business. And you're right, you get what you pay for. And when you're trying to provide finance to people on a budget, trying to save as much money as possible, I'm sure. So I really appreciate, how you're thinking about all of these barriers and kind of how they interconnect. I'd like to pass to one of our community members, Giovanni, who has a question for you.
Let me congratulate with you for what I listened so far. My question is how did you experience in the Emerging Talents program that shaped your approach to developing scalable and innovative solutions? Thanks a lot.
The MIT Emerging Talents Program is a program I was part of in 2020. By then, it was really still new. I think I was only part of the first cohort of that program. So it's a program which is offered by MIT, which really, it's a 1 year long program, and it helps especially give people an opportunity to learn computational skills and learn how to code. And also, I think a very big aspect from that, which I really liked, is the entrepreneurship. So it really starts out by learning hardcore courses are really a fundamental. I think the first course we learned was Introduction to Programming using Python. Then we go to computational thinking and data science, which really lay the foundation for you to really understand what computers are, what programming is, and really it gives you a very broad perspective. And I think I really like that course so much because they really gave a good perspective, especially in terms of what the field is like, and give you a good feel of what the industry is like. Now, learning something is always dependent on who is teaching it. So I really feel like having gotten that education from MIT lecturers and all that, you really get a very good sense of the field and a very good understanding of the concepts, because a lot of the first times I actually learned how to write to code was through this particular program. Everything really else I developed along the way was secondary, but this was really the foundation of me learning and starting to code. And now it's not really just about the coding part of it. There's a big aspect of it, which is the MIT Entrepreneurship Leadership Bootcamp, which you really have to do. And what this does is it helps you go through the entire process of creating a business. So you teamed up with a number of people from all over the world, and you try to come up with a business as various groups in the program. I was teamed up with a number of people, and we came up with a business which really, and it takes you really through the whole idea, from conception of the idea to ideating the idea to really being able to state who is your customer, what is the specific problem you want to solve, what is the solution you're providing, who is your specific customer, what is the market you're looking at, how big is this particular market, what is your term, and all these concepts and terms. That was the first time I really interacted with it, coming up with a pitch deck and all that. Really helps you to go through that whole stack, which is really like a business canvas, really from end to end, so that you have a very good understanding of how you would ideally approach solving a business. So to me, I think that was really valuable. Before that, I'd not really known that maybe the business entrepreneurship route was one I wanted to take. But I think after going through that, I really felt like a lot of that material and content really felt so much to me as a person. And I think those principles really helped me a lot, especially in terms of building this company. So really in two ways. In one, in really getting the foundation of the programming, which I later built on with understanding more tools, but also really understanding that whole entire scope of entrepreneurship really from end to end. And that collaboration, working with a number of people from all over the world, I think is always invaluable. It gives a broader perspective in the ways different people think, which is always useful when you're trying to do something.
Absolutely. I think it's so useful to get that perspective. And it sounds like it was such a useful course for you to do. I really appreciate hearing about that.
It really was, and it's a very great community to be part of. It didn't really end in 2020, but you still keep on interacting up to date. The number of opportunities and all that, which really still come through December Emerging Talent. So I think it's something I'd really definitely recommend for everyone.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. I'd like to shift a little bit to sort of entrepreneurship conceptually. In your perspective and giving your experience, what character traits or qualities do you think make a person more suited to become an entrepreneur and like sort of guide them in entrepreneurship more?
This is quite an easy one. Resilience. I know a lot of people have said this, but it's one of those things that actually can't be said enough. I think resilience to me is really the biggest character, the biggest trait someone really has to have. Resilience means you're short on your landlord, your rent bills of your house. Resilience means you don't have any money at all. Resilience means you looking at maybe you could do this job, maybe you could go and do this, but then you stick on what you're doing, which is in many ways ruining your life, for lack of a better word. You really believe it enough to keep doing it. That's the biggest thing I'd really say. And also, for someone to be an entrepreneur, you need to ask yourself, whatever you're trying to do you think you're going to want to still be doing this in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? I think that really helps you to make that kind of decision. If you're trying to do something and you know maybe by the end of the year or by next year, you're not really going to want to do this anymore, then I think it's not even worth trying anyway. Because you really have to know that something you're going to do. Because before I got into entrepreneurship, I had a job I was working at. I was getting paid. At least you have all your monthly bills taken care of and all this. But to me, I just feel like it wasn't fulfilling enough. I really felt like I could do more. I wanted to build more. And I wanted to solve problems and at my own terms, really, and to try and put together the ideas I have and see if I can create a business. So you quit your job. What this means is if you quit your job, that means like you quickly run out of money because you're operating in a sense whereby you do not have money coming in, but then you keep on spending because daily expenses are daily expenses. Like you need to buy food, you need to pay rent, you need to pay power, you need to pay water, all these kinds of things. So it's a painful process. I think I really have to emphasize this enough. I wouldn't encourage anyone to go into this if they really do not believe in what they're doing, because you'll give up very easily because it's usually a painful process. And a lot of times you're going to have either very little money or no money at all. And you see everyone else, your colleagues who are still doing the job and all that, like you just feel like everything is going backwards for you. So are you able to actually put up with that? Because I think that's really what it's usually about. The fancy entrepreneurs who we see are really at the end of their struggles. I think that's what is really publicized. But the truth is, once you get into even me, I didn't know that these are some of the things you experience when you become an entrepreneur. Because I mean, you work for a company, you have insurance and medical insurance, but you leave, you don't have insurance anymore. And then you have to learn all these kinds of things like how do you operate when you fall sick? You have to actually go to the doctor, you pay out of cash and all that. So it's really a different ballgame. And then I think the most important thing I have learned is value, because you can slack off at a job and you still get paid. You can do the bare minimum to not get fired and you'll still have a living. But I think if you're an entrepreneur, nobody pays you if you're not creating actual tangible value. Now, this is something which I don't even know how to explain it well because I think it doesn't really click for most people. Like if I walk to you and I want you to give me money for something, I'd better be creating real, actual, tangible value and not just a one multiple, maybe a 10 multiple for you to pay me a 1x. I'm creating 10x value or maybe 5x. But if you're not creating value for your customers, they're not going to pay you. It's that simple. And it sounds obvious, but it's usually not, especially for someone who's transitioning from a job into entrepreneurship, that you'd think you just do everything you do at a job and you keep getting paid. No, it's not really like that. Like you have to actually provide value for the client to be able to say like, here's my money, take it and give me this service. Because if you don't do that, they see your product, they talk to you and all that, but they never actually paid. So I think that's to me a key lesson: resilience and really being able to provide actual value. So you need to be able to be resilient in this process and also be able to actually create value. Because if you're not able to create value, I think there's no point in being an entrepreneur because one, you're not going to get paid and the problems you're going to go through will simply make you eventually crash and burn eventually. So I'm not yet at the end of my journey. I'm still really so much onto this journey, but I think those are the two things I've really learned. Like if I just pull through with this, eventually things start opening. It's like trying to turn a tire on a very rusty wheel, rather trying to turn a rusty wheel. Probably when you try to push it at first, it's not going to move at all. But maybe if you just keep pushing long enough, it will slowly start to turn before it really starts spinning. And I think that's one thing entrepreneurs need to really understand: resilience and being able to create value. I feel like value is not talked about enough, but you only get to understand value when someone doesn't pay you money. And then you're like,
Yeah, I think that's really good that you're able to kind of for yourself sort of drill it down to two things. I completely, agree with you that resilience is incredibly important because otherwise you can just find yourself sort of, down and out, just wallowing in your defeat. If you don't see those as new challenges to be solved, which you clearly do. I love that. As you're going along in this journey, how have you defined your success for yourself? And has that changed throughout the course of this project?
I think to me, success is going to be defined for me when all circles have been digitized and everyone can say the word Safari banking. Like they don't need to know me, but you mentioned the word Safari banking. I'm like, oh yeah, like, we know what that is. To me, I feel like that is what is going to really be success because one, I believe this is something very valuable that I'm creating. So if enough people eventually know this, if enough people eventually use this, I think that to me is the kind of success I envision because really what we set out to do here is to help transform lives and to help give people a better life and make their lives better, make their daily lives better. If I can see that coming out, I think that is to me, that is really what success will be defined as. And I know this is a fact that this is how I would measure it because like I mentioned, I'd done a number of jobs, I'd worked a number of places. But one thing I really never got out of all that is that kind of satisfaction of having created something in the world and someone used it. The best satisfaction, I think one of the best I ever got was when I created a website for a client, the first paying client I ever got, and they actually paid me money. And I was like, actually, you can do this, and someone actually gives you like real cash. Like I was amazed. Now I know that's very subtle, but I think there's something about that. Like you've done something valuable, and someone has actually paid you for that. It's different from a job. I don't know how to explain. I mean, a job in a corporation, the person who is even paying you doesn't know you and doesn't really care. Like they'll pay you anyway, whether you showed up or you didn't show up until maybe something happens. But in this case, you've actually talked to a human, a fellow human, and they liked what you did and they paid you for that. I think that's a very incredible feeling. So if you can get that for more, then you get more people to actually love the services, products you provide, and they pay you for that. I think to me that is what success will look like. And also success is really just giving my mom a good life. I think that's also something. Unfortunately, my dad passed away when I was still quite young, but I think also giving is success enough for me. And of course, I never pay IPO.
Excellent. That feeling of like the first time you've put something together, people liked it enough to pay for it. That's a really powerful feeling. And I totally get where you're coming from there. Absolutely agree with you. We've talked about quite a bit of the specifics of Everpesa and what your, traits that you think entrepreneurs should have. I'd like to get from you a little bit about what advice you'd give to other entrepreneurs if they were to come to you. Like if you were to talk it to yourself, say, just before you started Everpesa and you're, so excited for the future at that point, what advice would you have given yourself then?
I would say don't start. But no, this is a show for entrepreneurs. I think someone needs to know their why. Why are they actually starting what they're doing? Because doing a job is fine. There's really nothing wrong with that, right? Like, do you really want to do this? I think that's the question I'd really want. First of all, ask someone like, are you sure this is what you actually want to do? Because like I explained, especially in terms of the levels of resilience that it will take to get through, there's a lot you really have to go through and a lot of problems you will eventually face. Do you really want to put your life through this? I think that's something, to me, I think that's a very important question because I've gone months due on my personal home rent. You don't know how you're going to pay the people who are working for you, the sales, all these kinds of frustrations. Are you able to actually through with all these and really still see a clear picture? Are you able to convince your team like, yes, guys, I know things are not working out well, like, but let's just keep pushing a little bit harder and we probably something is going to come out here. Because to me, I feel like that's some of the most important parts. Because if you can pull through that, you'll eventually figure everything out. The tech part, all that will eventually be figured out. But are you as a person going to be able to pull through that? And what is your why? The why is important because that is what will probably keep you up trying to build onto this, even if everything doesn't seem to be going the direction you want. Like, I mean, you write countless letters for proposals to VCs and all that. Everyone is like, no, 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 no. So do you have that kind of self-belief, which is actually going to take you through those kinds of days? Because, if people tell you no long enough and you don't really have that conviction as a person, you will start buying into it because the opportunity cost is large. It's like, you know what, if I'd be doing my job, if I'd be doing this, which really starts sabotaging whatever you're trying to do. So I think that's what I'll tell them. And also another important one is really, once you've decided that you are going to be resilient. And this is really what you'd rather put your life in this aspect rather than just doing a regular job. And you're very sure, because like I mentioned, for some of us, I just didn't get any satisfaction from my job. So if you're really sure that you will not going to get any satisfaction from a job, but you really want to be able to do your own things and put them into the world, the thing you need to know is, one, people only pay for value. If you do not create value, nobody's going to pay you. They might like you, they might say hi to you, but they will not pay you money if you're not going to create for them any value. So you'd better be sure that you're actually going to create some kind of value. You might not know it initially, but eventually you must create value. And that is the only way you keep on being an entrepreneur, because it's a maze. It's a whole maze of so many challenges you're going to face. The last thing you want is to also be facing all these challenges and you're really pushing a product that really is not creating a lot of value for people and nobody really wants, and because then it's really defeats the purpose of whatever you're trying to do. And then I think also another one I'd say is innovation is important. It's amazing to always come up with new ideas and all that. But I feel like you also need to be able to assess practically if what you're proposing is able to work, especially in the short run, to keep you alive. Now, this might be a bit different from entrepreneurs operating in places where they have a lot of capital and they can just afford to dream a lot. But if you're operating from a perspective like us, where you do not have so much capital like you need to get it right. That's a question which you really need to ask yourself. Like, I wouldn't start a nuclear fission startup because that will take forever to get a breakthrough through that. So if your revenues are going to be tied to something which is going to take a lot of years to come through, you need to figure out what are the things you need to do right now to actually bring in a bit of money. And then also finally, I'd say really focus. Focus is really something very important, because I think one of the key things we entrepreneurs, and maybe I also suffer from, is because we're entrepreneurs and because we think so much and we have so many ideas, we easily get overwhelmed by a lot of things that we could actually be doing. And because you're in the fintech space, you're like, oh my God, you could do payments. Oh my God, you could do banking. Oh my God, you could do all these amazing things which are in your space. You could actually do them because you see you're qualified to do all these things. You're smart enough to come up with ideas in all these fields. Then the question is, you only have so much time and you only have so much resources. If you're not able to focus, you're going to spread yourself too thin, which I feel like I learned it as a bitter lesson. It's one of the things which I always feel like maybe we would have been much farther ahead if we had almost 100% focus. But because of what I went back to and I told you, like, one, you need cash. You need actual cash because you need to pay your bills. You need to pay this. You need to pay for servants. You need to pay for rent. You need to give the graphics guy to bring it down. You need to give the graphics guy doing your UI actual physical money to do that work. You need to give the lawyer actual money to register the company. You need to give the auditor actual money to do an auditor to help you do your financials and all that. These are things which are real costs that you cannot put them into the future. So you need to bring in money somehow. But then the thing is, a lot of times the things which can bring in money, especially for engineers, are maybe not the things you really want to do, especially in the long term of the company. I could write code, like I mentioned, I could do for your website if you wanted one. But that is not what is building Everpesa. But it can bring me revenue right now, today, tomorrow, next week. So you need to be able to balance how you're able to focus on really the cores of what you want to do in the long run and what you shouldn't be doing, even if you could actually be doing. Because if you do not have focus, you're going to be spread too thin. And lack of focus means taking a lot of clients who have very specific needs, which you might want to adjust to because you really want to get this client. But overall, it is pushing you in the direction which is away from everyone else you're actually supposed to serve. So it's really a painful thing for us because we get a lot of people. They want very specific things the application is supposed to do. And you know that maybe there might be more people like that, but it's probably not a very big market. So if you lose this client and really focus on the core of what you're trying to do, you might end up going into that direction. Now you add in something which someone else doesn't want and it becomes crazy. So you need to focus and define really what it is that you stand for, what it is that your company does, and what it is that your company doesn't do. What you want us to do. Oh, yeah, there's this other thing in fintech. Like, yeah, I know that's very interesting. We could probably do that. We could probably do crypto. We could do that. But as for now, we just don't have enough resources or manpower to go into that direction. This is the direction we really want to go to. I think that focus thing is really important. It's something I'm learned, but I think it's very important to be able to focus what you're trying to do.
I think there was a lot of wisdom shared in that answer, and especially at the end, talking about how we only have so much time and energy to do everything. And you really do have to prioritize and decide what your areas of focus are going to be now, how you're going to make money now so that you can do all these other things that, you're inventing in your head. So very, very well said. I really appreciate that. So you have shared a lot of wisdom with us today, but we actually like to ask at the end what words of wisdom you'd like to leave us with. So I think I would say to you, if you could, just leave us with one thing, what would you like to leave us with?
I've probably already said this before, but I think one thing I'd really love to leave is probably value. Try to create value in whatever you're doing and have a simpler measurement for what value is. And value is, can I do for you something that you can pay for? Let's not think about a whole market, 20 million people. No, leave that. Can you actually create value to a single individual and they're happy enough to pay you back for that? I think if you can figure that out, you can figure out most things. So I think to me, that's really the key one. What value are you creating in the world? What are you consuming and what are you putting out? Is the value you're creating more than the one you're consuming? I think that's a key one. That's really the parting shot I'd really have.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jerry. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. I think I'm at least very much looking forward to going back through this conversation and editing and releasing this as a podcast. You've given us a lot of words of wisdom, and I really appreciate that. And also, thank you to everyone who has joined us today. We really appreciate people bringing their questions, such as Giovanni's question, to the discussion, as well as their energy and perspectives. Nancy and I and the team behind Founders Voyage feel fortunate to be a part of this community with all of you and for the opportunity to bring this cooperative learning experience together each Saturday. Also, Jerry and anyone else listening, if you have any nominations for future Saturday session guests, we'd love to hear them. We're always interested in talking to more people who get benefit from the Founders Voyage community and that we could give benefit to. And once again, thank you so much for joining us today and have an amazing day, evening, afternoon, wherever anyone listening is ahead of them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a
You've just finished another episode of Founders Voyage, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. The team at Founders Voyage wants to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed your time with us, and if so, please share this with someone else who might enjoy this podcast. You can also support us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and by donating to our Patreon. Outro music today is Something for Nothing by Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band.